Welcome to the third season of That's So Second Millennium, the Catholic Science podcast where we explore the fascinating borderlands between science and theology through realms of philosophy, human experience, and more. Welcome back to episode 98 of That's So Second Millennium. So, this is Bill and I's conversation. It's just continued from last week. It's topical enough, we just wanted to release these in consecutive weeks. We'll get back to something resembling our natural schedule or our announced schedule next month, with an interview and a discussion. Although we're talking about, I'm going to be so busy next month. We're talking about using some stock footage, and in fact, an interview I did for another podcast that hasn't yet gotten released on that podcast. So that'll be interesting. You may enjoy that. I hope you do, if that is in fact what we use. In any case, so this time we get into a little bit more. I still don't even want to say technical, but we talk about the nature of the coronavirus and the infection, the disease that it causes. We talk a little bit about risk. We talk about economics. We even talk about that Italian earthquake trial that if you weren't a geologist, you may not remember very well, but I think we geologists are still pretty scarred by it. So it all comes together, I think, and hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you're not enjoying the coronavirus, but hopefully at least you'll enjoy this, eh?
The profit motive, the greed motive, the total reliance on materialism, and good old cash and credit and debt, and
Yeah.
that goes to my even broader concern than the health concerns. Like I was saying earlier, I'm concerned that ultimately coronavirus is going to wind up being a precursor to long-term financial difficulties, even more than long-term
Yeah,
health.
behind the either paywall or nag wall in the New York Times, I clicked on an article and like, oh, okay, I'm not going to go to this much trouble. But
Right.
it was somebody who was predicting some economic death spiral from the coronavirus fallout, which
Yeah,
certainly
huh?
I made the mistake of checking on my IRAs and my investment account the other day.
Right.
As small as they are, they're smaller
Right.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't remind me, my friend. I'm a little
Yeah.
older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're a little closer to needing that liquidity for more things than I need it
Yeah.
for right now. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. Here's
Yeah.
hoping
It's
it
tough.
bounces back, but yeah. No, I mean, and it's
Well,
the whole.
uh,
There's a lot that we can do in the modern age that, you can do a lot of useful things for other people at a distance now that you couldn't in 1985. But
right.
boy, there's still an awful lot that's just going to have to go on ice. I mean, in my corner of the universe, I'm looking at all of the, so my background is in, really kind of high tech materials research, and I was coming at it from the perspective of earth materials.
Right.
Um, but so there are all these huge facilities that the Department of Energy has, because they have equipment that no one else can have, because they have cyclotrons and
Right.
particle accelerators, and they can generate X-rays and other forms of radiation that somebody with just a piece of equipment in their own lab can't possibly match. So there are these user facilities, and of course those are
Right.
shutting down. And those are, I mean, the competition for those is like the competition for grant money. It's intense, because
Wow.
you really want to get time on these machines so you can do your experiments, so you can do this cool research, so you can find out about these strange things that matter does. And that's shutting down. Those things are
Wow.
shutting down, and that's a huge blow. And to the degree that it's they're doing work on things that are eventually going to bring economic benefits because they'll make things cheaper, faster, better. Yeah, I mean that's its own economic uh, burden and a difficult one to measure because of course it's kind of got this as a benefit like that, propagates into the economy. It just, it saves more and more money, saves more and more effort, frees up more and more human effort and resources for other things.
Yes. Yeah.
And
But we don't think with that depth or that sense of consequences like we
I
used
mean,
to.
we have to. I mean, we literally don't have any choice. We have people. We can't. The direct democracy is not possible.
Yeah.
We can't literally run things ourselves. So we have to
Right.
trust someone. And so in well, I mean, so and the someone in China, they're chosen by whatever oligarchic social methods.
Mhm.
You decide to become part of the party, you enter the party, you do well in the party, you rise to leadership in the party, and in all those oligarchic social fashions that you could, fascinating to know more about, but I don't. But if you're in India, or if you're in France or Italy or the United States, you win an election, and you do
All
whatever
right.
you need to do in order to win an election, and get the support of people to do that, and then you nominate people to fill all these administrative positions, and so that mass of people is making those decisions, and in the short term, that's who makes these decisions. So we have no point. We have no option other than basically doing what they decide to try to do. What except for following through on what they decide to do on our behalf. We don't we don't have
Yeah.
we don't have another viable option in the short term.
Well, that points to a kind of criterion that is becoming more sharply important to me through all of this, and as I get older. So, and it also ties in with the themes of our podcast. So, let me just again kind of draw the question about this social distancing as a phenomenon of science, as opposed to a science, as opposed to a phenomenon of religion slash faith spirituality. Does this whole phenomenon and the whole direction that we're going in, is it a symptom of how we have become so totally reliant on scientific thinking and so totally ignorant of or indifferent to criteria like, well, who's the ultimate source of wisdom, or what are the ultimate goals of society? The kinds of questions that are answered by faith and religion and not by science. It seems as though we're just kind of at the mercy of the answers given to us by science.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a bias that a lot of people have noticed toward, we manage things we can count, and
Yes,
so
yes,
we can count cases diagnosed, and we can count fatalities, and so that's going to loom larger in our mind than things that we can't count very readily.
yes,
Um, that's part of it, and then there's also, what you're talking about, the larger picture. I mean, there's that great phrase from Hilaire Belloc that, the practical man, and of course he's speaking in the early 20th century, but I don't know that it's any different now. The practical man, believes he's making, these hard-headed, obvious decisions, but he's really in the grip of some dead economist. He's actually,
yeah,
everything that he says is theory laden. That's not Belloc's phrase, but it's a philosophy of science phrase, but it's equally apt in this
that's right.
context.
Yes.
Um, and he's also another Bellocian phrase on the subject is that the practical man is defined by his incapacity to think his way through either back to first principles or forward to ultimate consequences.
Wow. Yes. Well said. Uh huh.
And that's so what is
Yeah.
the so I mean so ultimately what are we looking at here? We're managing risks. And
Yeah.
that's and so that that's probabilistic, and people don't understand probability. They would rather, you know, short circuit to something like it's definitely going to be this way. Science says it's going to be this way.
Yeah.
So in my little, Rush County, Indiana, with I don't know 20,000 inhabitants or something, somebody, and so this is going around the locals, like somebody that I actually literally met walking down my county road in the middle of nowhere, pulled over and had a little conversation with me yesterday, and they said, and I think I heard the priest say this too, or someone in the local community, 80 people are going to die of this in Rush County. What?
Huh.
What? I mean,
Uh,
and so I don't know, and of course I don't know because people don't think probabilistically very well. I know that. It's a game of telephone.
yeah.
What did the official say? Was it the official who had the problem with probabilistic thinking, or was it his audience that had problems with probabilistic thinking, or her audience
Yeah.
that had problems with the probabilistic thinking? And is that, and I mean, not just probability, but also the whole, is that if we did nothing, if we just conducted business as usual and didn't do any of the things that we're doing, 80 people in Rush County would die.
Ah,
And of
right.
course, 20 of them would be at Miller's Mary Manor. But,
Right.
and that's,
Yeah, that's a
that's
nursing
that's
home
another
or something. Yeah.
question. That's probably the biggest
Yeah.
single local nursing home. And it's got such a
Uh,
funny name, I just had to plug it. Miller's Mary
yes, no,
Manor.
there's one up here in South Bend too, I
There is,
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. I think
yeah.
I've heard that it's something of a chain, but yes.
But in any event,
That's called local flavor, people. But yeah, anyway. Yeah.
And I like local flavor, and I like the kinds of things that community brings to local discussions, to human conversation, to human thought. And I've always equated community with the spiritual or the more essential parts of human life and interaction. Whereas somehow science, while I love it and I'm fascinated by it, and I'm certainly going to obey its wisdom, um, science seems to be the force of globalization, the force of metrics, the source of, in a sense, oversimplified thinking.
Well,
Whereas,
let me
don't you
push
think?
on that. Let me push on that a tiny bit, Bill. Maybe it's another case where you could draw a distinction between science and maybe another form of scientism. I mean, of course, we usually use
Okay,
scientism
yeah, that could
in the
be.
context
Yeah,
of, believing that, well, science displaces religion. Well, no, science can't displace religion. Science is, I mean, it's just a different animal.
they do two different things.
It couldn't
Yeah,
if it wanted to replace religion. What you're replacing it with is a religion
scientism.
that we call scientism. That's,
Good
it's
point.
related to logical positivism and all that other crap. But
Good point.
in this case, the scientism would be, would be to pay attention to these things that we can, would be to take as the only criteria these things that we can see and count.
Yeah,
These, okay, this number of cases, this many hospital beds occupied, this many fatalities. I mean, I think those are the main criteria.
right,
We don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system, and we don't want people to die.
right.
Those are good things. Those are
Yes,
good
those
things.
are good things.
But,
Yeah,
how do you balance that? And this gets back to what I was originally saying about, in between elections, I mean, we're going to have an election where we have a referendum on how people treated this crisis along with everything else they've done during their terms in office.
yeah,
But, they have for the moment, we have no choice. We have no practical choice other than trust the people that we've elected and the people that they have nominated to do their jobs, appointed to
yeah,
do their jobs, to balance the risk between these things that we can count and all of the economic fallout of shutting the United States of America down for however
yeah,
many weeks we're going to shut the United States of America down.
yeah,
Shutting it
yeah,
down to this, to whatever minimal level we're going to settle for. Shelter in
yes.
place. No
Shelter
groups
in
of more
place.
than no groups of more than 10 people.
Yes.
That's got economic consequences, and you know it's one of those things where you have to draw a careful moral distinction that very seldom gets drawn anymore between things that you will to happen and things that happen as an inevitable side effect of goods that you will to achieve. Like you can, I mean, like a classic case is that you can perform an operation on a woman that has an extremely high risk of of killing the fetus within her.
Right, right.
But if her own life is in danger, I mean, first of all, if her own life is in danger, she's not going to be able to help the fetus very much. And second of all, it's life for life. Whose life are you going to choose? Ultimately, at some point, you have to make that choice. In this case,
Yes.
we're making a choice between, inevitably, as a side effect, no one's willing this, but inevitably, as a side effect of all this economic mayhem, people are going to die.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
inevitably, I mean, so 12-step groups, for example.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that I do attend 12-step groups. They've played a lot
Right.
of good in my life. And there are people for whom they're a matter of life and death. Not
Yeah.
any, not any individual meeting, probably,
Right. Right.
but but telling people at the Fairbanks facility on the north side of Indianapolis that they can't have a face-to-face 12-step meeting for the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks or what have you, of all of the dozens of 12-step meetings that go on there,
Yes.
um,
Wow. Yeah.
there's going to be some number of people who drink themselves to death. There's going
Oh
to be
my
some
goodness.
there's going to
Yeah.
be some number of people who commit suicide. Can you ever count
Wow.
them?
No, I hadn't
You
even
ever
thought of it, much
can you
less
ever
tried to count them.
can you ever try to estimate that? I mean, is that on people's minds? How many people would
Hmm.
that be? I mean, that's just one, close to me personally, something I can see from here.
Yes.
Consequence that, I hope is being taken into account. I don't know. I don't know.
But so I'm not. I don't consider myself ever a libertarian. But you're making me think. Well, in some sense, when groups are not just random spectator sporting events that are optional,
Right.
but can be life and death, or at least can be very crucial to a person.
Yeah.
Um, does government rightfully have that last say in whether a meeting can occur or not? I guess ultimately you do have to let
I
government
mean,
have a say, or else, if there are too many exceptions,
yeah, I mean they have a
the
say,
success is in danger.
but I
Yeah,
mean, we also individually, and we know as Christians, from day one, we knew that if we knew something was right, we would have to go against the government
right,
if necessary. I mean,
right.
and so if there's
But
somebody who,
we'd pay the price for it.
yeah, I mean, if there's somebody who gets run in and sent to jail and put in whatever kind of sanitized lockdown jails are in right now. God, that's
Right.
terrible to contemplate.
Yeah.
Because he was going to, by God, drive to somebody's house to have an AA meeting because he felt he needed a damn AA meeting.
Wow.
Um, I'm in favor of that guy, and I don't think it's necessarily fair that that's how he was treated. Um, because he's also got a higher power to look after him. It's not me. Sure as
Well,
hell
that's
not me.
true.
Sure as heck not me.
Yeah.
So there's at least that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a certain peace that comes from knowing I'm not in charge. We it frees us up to actually do something if we can let go of the fact that we ought to, that we have to do something, that we have to change it, that somehow we have to change it.
Right.
Like, okay, let me change what I can change. I mean, and of course that's 12-step wisdom itself, right? That's the
Yes.
serenity. That's the serenity prayer.
Yes.
Um,
And that's what but that's the kind of point that I'm trying to get at in my blog post, and that you raised implicitly. If we are going to have to divide ourselves down into these small groups, there are things that we can do, like maybe have more family family-wide use of our binge watching of TV programs, or
yeah,
of
you can you can
social
watch
media.
daily
There are
mass.
things
I
we
mean,
can.
Lord knows
Amen.
I'm going to certainly take advantage this year of, like, okay, well, if I literally can't go to Holy Thursday mass, well, I mean,
Right.
certainly I'm going to watch one if there's one to be seen somewhere, whether it's a recording of one
At
from
least on
previous years or
EWTN, yeah,
yeah,
the Pope's own, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, all of that.
Assuming the Pope is not canceled from doing
Well,
it,
he's
but
canceled public services at the
he has
Vatican, which, I
canceled
mean,
public services.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought there was a video. I thought I saw at least a still frame from a video feed of him saying daily mass at the Domus.
Hmm.
So hopefully something like that will go on.
Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Well, I just hope that we have some kind of rebound from this that's actually nourished by the experiences we're going through
Yeah.
right
Well, it's like you
now,
said. It's like
rather
you
than
said
one that's
earlier.
worsened.
Is it going to push us further in the direction of isolation, which is my argument we were already on. Is it just going to push us further, or are we actually going to rebound from it and say that was really terrible? I
Yeah,
don't know
right.
that I don't want to go
I
down
don't
this
want to
path
do
any
that
further.
again.
In fact,
Yeah.
I want to spend this summer or whenever this blows over, actually spending more time with my friends and my family,
Yeah.
and at public
Maybe even
events
going on
and at worship.
retreat or doing right.
Yeah, yeah.
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 It's well, it is, that's the ultimate truth that Viktor Frankl found in Auschwitz or whatever. That ultimately the freedom is to choose how you're going to respond to each individual circumstance, and thank God that's a freedom that no one can take away from us.
Right.
But it's just that our popular culture has so weakened that side of us that has the boldness to say, well, I'm a little bit more courageous than this, and I see both the scientific side and the spiritual side, and I have trust and hope that science cannot measure.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more of that without becoming a rebel to good scientific wisdom.
Right.
So
Right.
I guess
And
ultimately
a
where that
question that you
happens.
asked me, let me put a bookmark on what I was about to say and let you
Okay.
finish up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, please.
So you mentioned, as a scientist in your original email to me, asking for ideas about this.
Yeah.
Um, you asked my opinion as a scientist of how things are being handled relative to the SARS and the MERS, which
Yes.
were, arguably worse. Perhaps they were easier to transmit. Perhaps they were more lethal. I actually don't remember. I looked up a tiny, tiny bit about SARS, mostly enough to recall that it was in 2002 or so, and I think the
Right.
last cases were I think the WHO website said the last cases were in China in 2004.
Uh huh.
Um, but so I said that as a geologist, I didn't really know. But then I thought about it. I had several days to think about it. I'm like, actually, as a geologist, there is something that's something of a parallel. So do you remember? I mean, I don't know how much this is something in my world as a geologist. This was big news. I don't know how it was for
Yeah.
the rest of the world, but do you remember the earthquake trial in Italy?
No, I don't.
Okay, so in the town of L'Aquila, I think that's either near or actually at the ancient city where the exarch from that'd be Ravenna, wouldn't it? Is it near Venice or is it near Ravenna? I don't remember for sure. Anyway, I think it's over on the east
Yeah.
coast of Italy somewhere. But like basically all of Italy, it's earthquake prone. And so in 2009 there was an earthquake, and there were a lot of foreshocks before this earthquake, and people were agitated and they wanted to know what they should do. And so the Italian government sent over a batch of seismologists apparently to say, because I was just looking this up, I didn't even know this many details until today, um, that well, all these foreshocks are really a good thing because what drives an earthquake is stress, right? So if
Right.
all these little earthquakes are dissipating the stress one by one, that's great because it means it won't all go at once in a big earthquake,
I see. Right.
which is not necessarily really the case because we don't know how much stress there is to start with. One,
Good point.
the mathematically it's a little sketchy because a bunch of magnitude fours. Well, what's a bunch? 100. 100 magnitude fours maybe add up to a magnitude five or maybe
Hmm.
six. Um, and then I think they wound up with a seven or something. So they could have
Uh,
had a lot of magnitude fours that really didn't take much of the edge off of what was coming.
yes.
And people died, and they also recommended that people stay inside, which was arguably the wrong thing to do because there were plenty of buildings that were not earthquake safe and they
Oh,
collapsed on people.
indeed.
So
Yeah.
there were just a mass of lawsuits. I mean, they were against the six seismologists that were recruited to say these things at a public meeting a few days before the earthquake hit. They were against a scientist who was a government official who was charged with sort of coming up with this strategy and sort of recruiting these scientists to discuss it at this public meeting. And then his higher up was eventually implicated by some police phone tap conversation, because of course Italy's an awesome place with the mafia and propaganda do and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Italy's a wonderful place politically, but so the police had a wiretap on this guy's, higher up at the what was it, the Civil Protection Department, however whatever that translates into in Italian, or out of in Italian, from Italian.
Uh-huh.
So that guy was eventually he was the last one eventually indicted, and he was eventually acquitted, partly at least for lack of evidence, and partly because Italy has a law that you can't be convicted for anything more than 7.5 years after it happened. and they were
Ah,
right at like 7 years and 4 months or something, or 5 months
wow.
after the event by the time his trial finally wound up. So
Hmm.
yeah, so that was sort of disedifying, and I mean, and and now having read a little bit more about it, I'm like, maybe geologists are being a little bit too tribal and a little bit too protective of our own, because that does sound kind of sketchy. I mean, so what I was reading was an article actually in Science magazine, which is, it's for scientists.
Right.
It's one of the top two flagship journals, as you probably know. Most of the
I
listeners
do.
probably know, but maybe not everybody.
Right.
And so I would regard that as being on the scientist side, if anything. And they made it sound kind of bad.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huh?
so that was a case where risk wasn't managed very well. But but that's an endemic problem in geology, because that's, you know, what does the general public want to know from us? The general public wants to know when a disaster is going to happen.
Right.
And it's not easy to predict. Volcanoes are easier to predict than earthquakes, a lot easier to predict than earthquakes. But even then, it's not 100%, by no means. And earthquakes are just, damn, earthquakes are bad. I mean,
Yeah. Huh?
they're the
Totally
sort of thing that
unpredictable.
happens stochastically, statistically, basically. There's just a chance at all times, and there are sometimes things that warn you, and sometimes sometimes those things, you'll see something that looks identical to a lead up to a big earthquake, and nothing will happen. It's just, I mean, it's a mess. That can happen on the same fault. You know,
Yeah. Huh.
individual stretches of faults can have repeating behavior. I mean, and of course, another problem is that we've only got any kind of actual seismic data for the last 100 years, and that's not long. Any kind of recurrent behavior on a lot of faults is going to be over a longer time period than 100 years.
Right.
We just don't have the data. We just don't have the data to tell people. And so what do? Well, we're going to be excessively cautious, but how excessively cautious? Because you come right
Yeah.
back up to that question of risk that we were talking about earlier. Like, well, if you paralyze people, if you tell people don't do, I mean, so first of all, if you tell people, I mean, that's the worst part. If you tell people to prepare for the worst and do all these things and nothing bad happens,
Right.
it becomes, I mean, this goes back to the conversation I had with my neighbor yesterday. It's talking
Yeah.
about, like people not trusting
Yeah.
the government. I wonder
Uh-huh.
why. I wonder why.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And in a society where there's no trust between people, we really are, unless we have trust in God, and fewer do.
Yeah,
Really, the only thing you can put your trust in is the data and the experimentation
yeah.
of science. Not that that's inherently bad, but as our sole source of wisdom, I
Well,
wouldn't.
it's just inadequate. You can't. Yeah, I mean, first of all, our current scientific knowledge is itself considered, on scientific terms, woefully inadequate for an awful lot of questions.
Yeah.
And second
Yes.
of all, it literally can't answer all questions.
Yes. Yes.
It can't. It can tell us this is likely to happen if you do this, and even in, economically, this is likely to happen if you do this. But it doesn't tell you how to weigh those consequences against each other.
That's right. That's right. Yep. We have to be prudent and morally and philosophically educated, as well as scientifically. And well, maybe we can spend some time in the next few weeks while we have a little bit of time in front of the TV. Maybe we should at least just watch the Science Channel or PBS
Or
or
you mentioned
C-SPAN
EWTN.
or yeah,
Or
or EWTN. Exactly.
yeah,
That's a perfectly good alternative. Except that we do need science, and good religionists would agree.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
I mean,
Scientists might
that is
write
the
up, but
question. What is our civic duty? I mean, because that's the
yeah,
society that we live in. It implies the system that we have was set up with the understanding that we would all take some sort of share
yes,
in political life. And
yes,
yeah, what is that share? I mean, and that's a question, and frankly, I am not satisfied with my own lived answer to that question so far in my life. But
yes,
that's also because did I mention I go to a couple of 12-step groups? I've got some issues to sort out, and
Sure.
that's
A lot of people, most people do.
I have hopes. I have a lot, I have a lot of hopes that things will change significantly over the course of the rest of 2020. The initiatives that I'm
Beautiful.
taking, and
Beautiful.
and fruit being born from things that I've already done to try to live my life better. But that is definitely okay. What is my role? What is my personal role? Because it's more than just voting. It's definitely
Hope
more than
so.
just voting.
Yeah.
How do,
Yeah. No, so many people have reduced their role to simply that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and bitching about it on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah. We've made our whole life politics, representing the fact that we think that government is the only God.
Yeah. I
And
mean, we make our whole life politics, and then we don't do anything, except we don't do anything useful about it. Do we actually
yes.
look around our community and say, what at a level that I can, principle of subsidiarity, what at a
Right.
level that I can actually affect can I do to make this community better politically as well as all the other ways? And maybe it's
Right.
not politically. Maybe I should really put that effort into something that's not politics.
Right.
But I need to make that choice very deliberately. Very, very
Well,
deliberately.
absolutely. 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 Yeah. So, yeah, I hope that I hope that over the next month or two or however long, we can ponder from our experiences that are a little bit more internalized. What does it mean to act deliberately and purposefully and with a sense of consequences and a sense of conscience?
Hmm.
And if this is indeed a Lenten experience that we're all kind of
Just
joining
sure
in
is.
on, we might as
Sure
well
is.
enjoy the redemption part after the cross part. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
that,
and to look
that's
forward
my
to
hope.
that. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I had to learn a long time ago that I should look at Lent. It's like it as a child, as a teenager, I sort of bumbled my way into this mindset that I'm not allowed to think about Easter until it happens,
Oh
and that
my.
actually makes no sense at all.
No, no, you
That's
can't have one without the other.
I should be making these preparations with the expectation, and Easter is going to come, and I'm
Right.
going to feel a lot better for my spiritual house having been cleaned to this extent, and having grown in virtue and grace, and and started some good habits that I intend to continue after Easter, and put down
Right.
some bad habits that I intend to leave down after Easter. Um, yeah, but we get so caught up in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, this is a long, wide-ranging conversation. I hope we'll have
Yeah.
more of them. I'm sure we will. And
Uh,
so, thank you for joining me in this conversation. I think a lot of people, partly because they're being holed up at home or whatever, a lot of people are thriving or thirsting for these kinds of conversations.
I hope so. I
And
hope
not
so.
finding them sometimes. Yeah, maybe it's a golden age of podcasting. That would be nice. Yeah,
It certainly
again,
it
esteemed
was
to
that
face.
before the coronavirus, and
Well, that's
if there's
right.
something we can afford to have the coronavirus inflect its upward trend even further, podcasts are probably okay.
There you go. I like that. Yes, let's let it be victorious at least in one limited realm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
Uh,
Well,
by
always
all
good to
means,
talk with you,
do
Paul.
something good for yourself. Go
Yeah,
for a run.
likewise.
Stay 6 feet from people and listen to a podcast. Go for a walk. Go for a run and listen to a podcast. Yes.
Oh, okay, very good. I think I'll do everything except the run part.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, fair enough. And I won't run for politics either.
Okay, that's
Don't
fair.
worry about that. Yeah,
Your role in our political culture is different than that, and that is okay.
exactly. Yeah, please God. Yeah. Hey, good to talk with you.
All right. Take care,
Yeah,
Bill.
thank you. All right,
Until
take
next
care.
time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's So Second Millennium. TSSM's audio producer is Morgan Burkhart. Our theme music, Igneous Grok, was composed and performed by Vin Marquardt. For my co-host Bill Schmidt, I'm Paul Giesting. Until next time.